Good evening. My name is Marilyn Maxner, and I'm a member of the Voter Service Committee of the League of Women Voters of Monterey County, which is co-sponsoring this forum with the Carmel Valley Association. And Mibbs, where are you? Mibbs McCarthy will come up and give you a word of welcome before we go on and get started with the forum.
Okay, I'm so happy that Carmel Valley Association has been asked to co-sponsor this forum with the League of Women Voters. I'm a member of the League, and we are always want to participate. I really welcome you here. It's very important to us in Carmel Valley who is our sheriff. I mean, you know, we rely on the sheriff's office, and we're really glad that we have a branch office right next to Sotheby's at Baronda, and so we're interested to hear what all the candidates have to say, and we welcome you. Thank you.
We were planning to present 4 candidates tonight for you, but Mr. Bernal had a death in the family and had to go out of town, so he will not be here. But we have 3 candidates here in alphabetical order, which happens to also be their seating order: Fred Garcia, Scott Miller, and Mike Richards. Okay, how will the evening proceed? A forum is not a debate. The candidates will not be addressing one another, but the audience. Mr. Garcia will speak first, Mr. Miller second, and Mr. Richards third. At the end, it'll be the reverse order. The candidates will begin with opening statements of no more than 2 minutes each. I will then pose questions to the candidates from the audience, and I have some already. They will take turns answering first, and each answer will be no longer than 1 minute. Okay, it's time to get started. The opening statement, the first one will go to Mr. Garcia.
First of all, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming tonight on Friday night. I think you can find probably better things to do on your Friday night than come and listen to us talk. But thank you for coming. And secondly, I want to thank the League of Women Voters for hosting this event tonight. My name is Fred Garcia, and I'm a retired commander from the Sheriff's Department. I have a 29-year history in law enforcement. All have been with the Monterey County Sheriff's Department. 14 of those years I served as a deputy sheriff with the Sheriff's Department. During those 14 years capacity, I was a field training officer. I was also trained in the Coroner's Division. I also held a position with the Sheriff's Department SWAT team. And for 14 years, I was successful in testing and being promoted to the rank of sergeant. And during that time, I had worked all 3 stations in Salinas, King City, and in Monterey. Collateral assignments that I did hold as a sergeant with the Sheriff's Department, I took over the Sheriff's Department SWAT team, and I was a member of the SWAT team for approximately 20 years. And the second collateral assignment I had was a field training program. And when I took that program over, all the training went out of the Salinas office, so I was responsible for approximately 12 field training officers and all the trainings that came into the program and were prepared for working the streets. My last 7 years, I was a commander with the Sheriff's Department. 3 of those years were as a commander of the Investigations Division, approximately 30 employees working in that division. And my second assignment of 3 years was the commander of the King City Station, where I supervised approximately 20 deputies, 3 sergeants, and 1 professional staff. And my 7th year, my last year, was split between 6 months in the training division and 6 months in the Homeland Security. I think if you look at the paper every day, there are many issues facing the Sheriff's Department, the budget issues, morale issues, and those need to be addressed, and that's probably the main reason why I'm running for the sheriff for Monterey County. Thank you.
Mr. Miller.
Well, thank you to the League for hosting, and thank you for being here. As opposed to what Fred just said, I don't think there's a better place you could be this evening than listening to the sheriff's candidates in this particular forum, so I disagree on that. My name is Scott Miller. I'm currently privileged to serve as the sheriff of Monterey County and have for the last 3.5 years. Before that, I was police chief in Pacific Grove for 6 years. I served 17 years with the Salinas Police Department, including 8 years at the executive level as the number 2 person in the department. I also was elected to the Pacific Grove City Council for a tortuous 4 years, as those in the audience, several can attest. The great thing about being the incumbent sheriff is that you have a track record to look at. And while you may listen to diverse opinions as to the success of the last 3.5 years, I will stand my record up against any comments, any scrutiny, any research, any analysis anyone would like to do. We've made tremendous progress in every area, from fiscal management to obtaining $89 million for a new jail expansion, to doubling the amount of training that deputies receive, to adding 40 new deputies once the budget difficult times recovered, to a creative and innovative use of 24 new civilian positions to augment staffing in the jail, and many other accomplishments that have taken place in the last 3.5 years. I have a master's degree in management. I'm a graduate of the FBI National Academy and the California Command College. I've spent the last 38 years of my life in public service, and I've prepared myself to be the best sheriff that Monterey County could have. I would appreciate your support for the next 4 years so that we can keep the consistency going and the stability within the sheriff's office and not put the sheriff's office through the trauma of change at this critical time where so many important projects are ongoing. Thank you.
Mr. Richards.
Well, thank you, and thank you to the League of Women Voters for having us here tonight. I appreciate the opportunity for you to listen to us and hear what we have to say, and contrary to what Sheriff Miller says, I don't believe that the fiscal management and all the successes are actually there. I am privileged to have served the people of Monterey County for 23 years in the Monterey County Sheriff's Office. In that time, I've worked in almost every capacity at the Sheriff's Office. I've worked in the jail, I've worked as a bailiff, I've worked as a transportation deputy, I've worked on patrol, I was a patrol sergeant, an internal affairs sergeant, a detective sergeant. I've managed the coroner's office. I was a commander that oversaw the professional standards division, which encompasses a lot of different things. I was the commander of the King City Station, just like Fred Garcia was. During that time, I've also worked in all the stations of the Monterey County Sheriff's Office. My issues are the fiscal management of the Sheriff's Office, which I don't believe has been handled properly. The jail is a huge issue right now. Sheriff Miller says that he's gained a grant of $89 million to fix the jail. Well, that's great, but it hasn't been done yet. The jail is the subject of a number of lawsuits over the treatment of inmates and the medical care of inmates. Staffing, it's severely understaffed, it's overcrowded. Also at issue are narcotics use in Monterey County. It's at an unacceptable level. Gang violence is still at an unacceptable level. Homicides and shootings are still up. Additionally, ag crime is a serious issue that I want to address. It's been largely ignored for the past few years, and Monterey County definitely needs a new sheriff, and I humbly ask for your vote, and hopefully I'll be able to tell you why. Thank you.
Okay, our first question, we'll start with Mr. Miller, then to Mr. Richards, and then Mr. Garcia. What specific issues are there for the Sheriff's Department with regard to Carmel Valley, and how will you deal with them?
There's a number of issues relevant to Carmel Valley, and Carmel Valley is as diverse as any geographic region of the county, from Kashawa and back to Arroyo Seco, up to Mid-Valley, the village, and all parts in between, the mouth of the valley, Barnyard Crossroads, and so forth. As most people know, towards the end of last year, there was a spate of residential burglaries in the valley. I called for a meeting, a community meeting. We put that meeting together. We had a wonderful attendance, about 400 people. We've continued with neighborhood watch programs and community programs. We continue with selected enforcement and targeted enforcement to keep down the residential burglaries, which dropped significantly for some time, but we do need to monitor that because residential burglaries have come up here in numbers not seen historically, as they have around much of the state in view of prison realignment. So that's the primary issue we're dealing with right now.
Thank you. I believe the number one issue affecting the residents of Carmel Valley is their level of public safety. On any given day or night, there are never more than 2 or 3 deputies patrolling the entire length of Carmel Valley. Again, the staffing level at the Sheriff's Office is probably the lowest it's been in a number of years, and I strongly believe that we need to increase the patrol staffing for Carmel Valley, and which would also be a deterrent to further crimes. As Sheriff Miller stated, the burglary problem was a huge issue, and those burglary crimes are most commonly directly related to narcotics crime. When you've got a lot of narcotics sales and use in Monterey County, that needs to be addressed as well as the burglaries. And in my mind, we need to increase the staffing in not only patrol in Carmel Valley, but also in the investigative unit and our special enforcement detail to address these crimes as they occur. Thank you.
Well, Carmel Valley is very spread out, and obviously you have roads all over the place. You have residents way off the roadway that are not visible to the normal patrol car. As Mike has stated, we do have a severe issue with properly staffing deputies out in the streets. One of the things that I did attend that meeting when they had that rash of burglaries. One thing that I saw with the residents up there were just really seeking help from the sheriff's department, and I think there was what I saw when I attended that meeting was a great willingness to become involved with the sheriff's department. I know they used to have a field office right down there in Mid-Valley, I believe. And something that I believe in strongly is that you see citizens of the community want to get involved. I would open them back up and see if those citizens want to be a part of the sheriff's department and actually man that station. One issue that I saw, what I was kind of distracted and disturbed with, was the 19 burglaries in 19 days. I don't think you wait 19 days and have 19 burglaries and then call a meeting. I think we should have been on top of that right away. I think we should address the burglary as quickly as possible. I think that problem festered way too long.
Okay, Mr. Richards, you'll start with this question. We have people here from Prunedale, and they want to know what can be done to increase the number and presence of deputies to combat home invasions, drug gangs, and excessive noise from parties.
Well, that's a wide variety of issues. You know, my answer is pretty similar to the answer about Carmel Valley. You know, geographically, we're talking about two different locations, but the issues are typically the same, and it goes back to our staffing issue. I don't think the budget's been handled appropriately to where we've been able to bring our staffing back up to where it should be. Of course, recently Sheriff Miller has hired approximately 40 new deputies, but it's a little too late, if you will. Over the past 3.5 years, the staffing has actually dropped quite a bit before it's actually risen back up. And I've talked with the deputies on the street, and they tell me that there have been a number of days where Monterey County's had maybe 3 or 4 deputies in the whole county working on patrol, and that's unacceptable. To answer all 3 of those questions, we need more staffing. Thank you.
Mr. Garcia?
Well, I live in Prunedale, so I hear your concerns. Again, the whole Prunedale area is very spread out, and I'll tell you, when I was a deputy sheriff, I enjoyed working Prunedale, but when I worked Prunedale, it consisted of Prunedale, Oak Hills, Moss Landing, and Castroville. So you can imagine a deputy running all over the place. The problem is we do have very severe staffing shortages within patrol, and we have to make sure that our deputies are the priority, both in the jail and in patrol, to get them properly trained. Unfortunately, I'm not agreeable with the current process of where they're training deputies once they come out of the academy, which takes a great more deal of time to get them prepared to work the streets. But again, staffing is critical, and you have to have a very proactive approach to that, and you have to, that comes from the sheriff. The sheriff has to be very proactive and has to impart with the deputies that working with the community is a priority, and without the work and the assistance of the community, you're not going to be able to get anything done on your own. Thank you.
Before I became sheriff, the sheriff's office had lost about 75 deputies over the previous 10 years, and that happened before my watch. When I walked in the door, I was advised to reduce my budget by $12 million at the height of the economic downturn. We whittled that down to about $5 million, and just this year we were told that starting next month we were going to have to reduce our budget another $4 million. We've negotiated that away. We will not lose any positions in the upcoming budget. We may be the only department in the county that won't lose positions in the upcoming budget, and that's a result of the negotiations we've had with the county and the experience we have with dealing with budgets. But I have hired 40 deputies in about the last 18 months. Also, those 24 new custody and control positions replacing deputies in the jail, who then can then be redeployed to not only other places in the jail, but patrol as well. And that's the best way to augment staffing. You know, it's difficult to hire people when you don't have any money. It's to go out and find the money and work creatively with what you have.
Okay, I have 2 questions here that will kind of combine, and Mr. Garcia, you're first on this one. Do you have suggestions about staffing so that we can hire more deputies rather than paying so much money for overtime? And what are the sources for increased funding for staffing? How would you increase these sources?
Well, I think the first thing, I think the biggest problem you have with the Sheriff's Department, the biggest advocate you have for hiring deputies and getting deputies to come and work for your department are from the deputies themselves. They carry the greatest voice to get people to come, and let's face it, we rob from other departments to get quality employees from other agencies to come work for us, as well as new recruits. The morale level at the Sheriff's Department is so low, you don't find any deputies telling anyone to come work for the Sheriff's Department, which makes it very difficult to do. So the first thing you do have to change the morale factor at the Sheriff's Department, where deputies are out there. They're your biggest advocates, they're your biggest salespeople. As far as finding funding for the Sheriff's Department, you have to have a very tight working relationship and a positive working relationship with all of the Board of Supervisor members. But it doesn't mean you can't also go out and look for grants. Although grants are a great thing, I'm not a great fan of grants because after several years they'll go away and then you're stuck and you got to find additional funding for those positions that were funded by those grant positions. But I think a positive working relationship with the Board of Supervisors, I think you can stress the need, no frills, and once you show that you're not having any special fill positions to spend money.
I've mentioned some of the steps we've taken to increase staffing, but I would mention that your best salespeople for the jobs are deputies, and morale has probably never been higher than it is right now, contrary to what Fred said. And that's, you see that in a couple of illustrations. You know, the number one illustration people look at to see if people are disappointed with a department is how many people have left the department to go to work for other law enforcement agencies. And in the past 2 years, to my knowledge, we have lost exactly 0 people to other law enforcement agencies because the people in the Sheriff's Office are happy. It was also reflected in the recent Deputy Sheriff's Association vote that gave me 36% of the approval of the deputies who voted. The next highest was Fred with 20%. Number 3 was 17% for none of the above, 16% for Mr. Bernal, and 9% for Mike here. I took that as a good sign, and you may hear spin later on during the evening as the opportunity presents itself that those numbers really are meaningless and the people who didn't vote really would have voted for someone else. But those are the real numbers. So morale is good at the Sheriff's Office and staffing is as well. Thanks.
Mr. Richards?
Thank you. Well, I'll agree with Fred about the morale issue, and regarding the vote, over 60% of the deputies decided not to vote at all, and that makes a powerful statement as well. But getting back to the issue of staffing, I think the problem is that we're trying to catch up a little bit too late right now. And one thing I'll actually agree with Sheriff Miller on is his plan to train all new deputies in both jail operations and patrol. I think it's a fantastic idea. But right now, with that plan, it'll take a year or so before we have a deputy that's actually a viable deputy to be on the street on his own or in the jail on his own. So what I would propose to do in the meantime would be to train these deputies for their specific positions and leave them there until it's such time that we are up to staff and we can afford to train them, cross-train them in other positions. And that way we'd have more people on the street and in the jail sooner. Thank you.
Talking about the jail, please comment on the jail overcrowding and how you would improve conditions at the jail.
That's another thing we can look at in terms of my track record. We reduced the average daily population since I took over as sheriff by roughly 25% through a variety of ways, including obtaining a contract with Alameda County to house 60 of the realigned prisoners in Alameda County. And that was legislation that I worked on to get approved, and we're working on an additional bill now to extend that so we can continue to do that. But we've done a lot of things, expanded work alternative. We expanded the own recognizance release program so that people are released for various crimes that previously they weren't. We modified the ICE hold policy, which also had an effect. And we worked with the courts on their new misdemeanor arraignment trial, which has had a tremendous effect, where instead of going back and forth continually between the jail and the courthouse, most of those cases are now resolved in one trip, and it's had a tremendously positive effect on the numbers in the jail. I did obtain that $89 million so that within the next 4 years we'll have plenty of space. Overcrowding will never be a problem again.
Well, that is a problem. Of course, I've got a little bit different perspective. When I was hired by the Sheriff's Office in 1989, the jail was smaller, and it's experienced 2 additions since the time I worked in the jail. And even back then, we had a population of an average of around 1,200 inmates. So actually, the population to size ratio is a little bit better right now, but it's still a problem. There are a lot of problems that need to be addressed. One of the big problems I see are the staffing level in the jail. We've already talked about staffing level, but an additional problem with the staffing level in the jail is the fact that we have a high workers' compensation rate, a lot of people out on workers' comp, and a high absenteeism rate, and a lot of that is morale related. I would want to focus on that. The 24 positions that Scott Miller is talking about, civilian positions in the jail, are positions that were formerly handled by deputies. Those positions were deputies sitting basically in control rooms, and the argument is that these positions could be better handled by civilians. But I'll tell you more about that later.
Obviously, I think to improve the safety conditions of the jail, you have to have an appropriate number of deputies working in the jail. Scott used the word spin, talking about 24 civilian deputies, but he didn't tell you that only 6 of those positions are filled. So it's not having 24 deputies getting to go do other things while these 24 civilians are working these positions. That's simply not true, and he knows, and it's disappointing that he continues to beat that drum. The main thing is when you get sufficient number of deputies working in the jail, it's able to provide 2 important factors: safety for the deputies and safety for the inmates. And when you focus on that and you work to get those positions filled, you create a safer environment. Yes, the jail is incredibly overcrowded. We saw the big headlines in the newspaper and the damning reports that were done by independent people. But it's a jail that I think has really outgrown its usefulness. I think, we got $89 million to expand the jail, but it doesn't address the issue of the old section of the jail that still has to be addressed. And it's going to be a continuous problem that the county is going to have to deal with at one point. Thank you.
Mr. Richards is next. As sheriff, what would you do to reduce the number of inmates in the jail awaiting trial who were unable to pay the high bail rate?
That's easy. I would look towards establishing programs in the jail. I'd look to the community for outreach programs. I would look for programs for job training and educational programs, even faith-based programs. I would do this and also hold the inmates responsible for their crimes. In other words, we would probably be able to release more people into the community this way. Part of the problem is the recidivism rate. Right now, the recidivism rate in Monterey County is at 74%. And in Monterey County, you experience an average jail bookings every year of about 14 to 15,000. And that's not 14 to 15,000 new people coming in and out of jail every day. These are the same people that go in and out and come back in all the time. I would look for programs to help some of these people get back on their feet and be, productive members of society, and thereby reduce the recidivism.
I think the first thing you do as sheriff is you have to work with the courts. I think when you look, I think Monterey County is probably rated as one of the highest when you're talking about bails for pretrials. I think you can work with the courts to find a fair across the board bail process that matches throughout the state, number one. And number two is I think you need to work with the courts to find what crimes that can be released without on their own recognizance, such are absolutely nonviolent crimes. I think a lot of those pretrial crimes and people that can't make bail are stuck in the jail, and I think that only exacerbates the problem even greater.
We've actually taken a number of steps to reduce our pretrial population, and the pretrial population has come down by 10 to 15% in the last few months. We do work with the court system because the court is the body that's responsible for setting the bail. Our current judiciary believes that their bail is reasonable based on the area. Not everyone agrees with them, but they're the ones that set that. But there is a very robust pretrial program, which is now becoming even more robust, that's conducted through the probation department with funding from the Community Corrections Partnership, which will allow for additional people to be released pretrial with the assent of the judge when presented the individual's information by probation. And that's an important part of the community corrections partnership, that we'll see a further reduction in the amount of people held pre-trial, I'm certain.
Okay, Mr. Garcia, you start this one. How would you rate Monterey County's disaster preparedness? How adequate is our communication system?
Okay, I can tell you, I believe some of the deputies went through disaster training just today, if I'm not mistaken, which is provided free of charge. So I think the Sheriff's Department is doing the right track of staying on top of disaster preparedness. As far as the communication systems, and speaking to deputies, I know that they've gone to a mandate by the state regarding bandwidths, but I've been told that the current portable radio systems are not very good, and they need to be improved. I think the biggest problem in my 29 years when I was with the Sheriff's Department, unfortunately, the county would always look at what was the cheapest deal, and that was the most appropriate. So I think we need to be very secure in the way we look at purchasing equipment, and it needs to be the top of the line, not just the cheapest, but the most that we're going to be able to use down the road, not just for today.
We actually are just now completing the next generation radio project, and we hope that that will significantly improve communications throughout the county. In terms of emergency operations, we have an excellent program working with the Office of Emergency Services for Monterey County, and it was exemplified in the recent fires in Big Sur, where we had command posts on scene, everything running smoothly, as compared most likely to the Basin Complex fire of 08. We'd also formed partnerships with local residents so that we could use the local residents to ferry supplies and support to the people who chose to shelter in place in the hills there in Big Sur, and that worked spectacularly. And I'm glad to report no one was injured. Everything worked seamlessly, and the partnership between the Sheriff's Office and the local residents during that emergency was far superior to what it has been in past years, and we're going to continue building those types of partnerships.
Thank you. I'm fortunate to have extensive training from the Federal Emergency Management Agency on disaster, and I would tell you that the disaster preparedness in Monterey County is very good. The Office of Emergency Services works very closely with the Sheriff's Office. We have constant training and constant what they call tabletop exercises, where there are disaster scenarios that are actually handled in place as if they were a real disaster. I worked with the Office of Emergency Services back when we had the Basin Complex fires. I was a fixture at the Office of Emergency Services Emergency Operations Center and have extensive experience in that regard. I am the author of the Sheriff's Office component of the Office of Emergency Services Winter Storm Emergency Plan, and I've also offered the Sheriff's Office a policy on evacuations and roadblocks. As far as radios go, they've been a problem. I understand that the next generation...
What is your main concern regarding Monterey County youth? How do you propose to solve this problem?
Well, and I have 1 minute to answer that. Very good. But you know, taking an active part is important. That's one reason I'm on the Community Alliance for Safety and Peace that deals with intervention and prevention of gang problems before people join gangs. And that's really the crux of the matter. And in my opinion, there's many, many great people working on this overall, and I believe, just my empirical belief, is that the numbers have come down of people that are entering gangs. But we know that we can't arrest our way out of gang violence and violence in general. We know that we need to have things like art, music, libraries, sports, those types of programs that can divert our young people into productive lives. So there's many things that we can do. We can have school resource officer programs, and I'm working now with North Monterey County School District to re-implement a school resource officer program there, along with looking at Explorer posts. We talked about that today in terms of reinventing the Explorer post. Many things we can't do.
Well, this is a subject I care a lot about. Back when I was a patrol deputy, we had a program at the sheriff's office called the Juvenile Impact Program. And what that was is it was an in-house program which was operated by a former LAPD officer who had implemented the same program down there. It was very successful there, and it was very successful in Monterey County. And what it did was that it offered the deputies the opportunity to have reference materials with them. So when they encountered an at-risk youth while on patrol, somebody who was possibly leaning towards gangs or drugs, they could refer that youth and his family to this program, and it was very successful. We're missing that now, and I would like to see some kind of interconnectivity between the sheriff's office and a program like that. It doesn't necessarily have to be in-house. I would like to see some kind of interconnectivity between the sheriff's office and, for example, the Rancho Cielo project or the Second Chance Youth project, or even smaller things like music. There's an organization called Sam's School of Rock. It's a nonprofit organization, and kids get into it, and it's something besides gangs and drugs. And I have other ideas as well.
Speaking of the Juvenile Impact Program, that is something that will become a part of my administration when I am sheriff. I think when I was with the Sheriff's Department and that program was in effect and we lost it due to budget cuts, that was an immensely successful program. And what it was is it made it important that families with problems and children that were uncontrollable did not just fall through the cracks. They were referred to the Sheriff's Department, and what we did was we had someone in civilian clothes go out, speak with the mother, speak with the father, and speak with the juvenile. Get the uniform out of the picture, try and build up a relationship with them, and that was a very successful program. This is a problem that's not going to be solved overnight, as you know. It's a terrible problem. But I think other than just simply having school resource officers, I support 100%, we need to get our deputies out of the cars, whether we're on a program or not, walk into a school, say hi to the kids, and let the kids know who they are. The parents need to see deputies talking to their kids, not just at night or when they're in trouble, but on a friendly basis, and build up a relationship with those parents. Only when you build up that relationship can you start making a dent into the problem.
Mr. Richards, you start this question. Is one reason we have so many repeat offenders addictions? Would it be better to place them in treatment facilities?
Yes. That's the simple answer. I started touching on this in one of my other answers, and part of the thing I think we need to develop in the jail among the programs are rehabilitation programs, because there's an interconnectivity between narcotics crimes and other crimes such as burglaries and auto thefts and things like that, because typically these criminals do these crimes to support their drug habits. So anytime we can offer some kind of rehabilitation program to that might help these individuals, I think it would impact public safety and crime overall in Monterey County. This rash of burglaries that occurred in Carmel Valley back in November, the 19 burglaries in 19 days, those offenders that were arrested all had drug problems, and that's why they were committing these burglaries. I'm a strong advocate for rehabilitation programs within the jail and outside the jail.
I support rehabilitation programs 100% in the jail. And we look at the onslaught and oncoming of AB 109, we're having more inmates who are going to be spending more time in our county jails. It does our community no good to have them sit in the jail for 3 years on their hands doing nothing. We need to invest in rehabilitation programs, vocational training. We need to find a way to get these people rehabilitated so when they go back into the community, they have something to look forward to. Without that, there is no hope for them. You fill out an application, I use a story, when you fill out an application, the first thing an employer does is they flip it over and they look at the back page and look at the bottom line, and what does it say? Have you been convicted of a felony? And once you see that, they're pretty much not going to be hired. So where is their hope? There is no hope. I think when we get them, we have a rehabilitation program to give them some sort of vocational training to something to follow up on once they get out. It gives them at least a path to try and follow so they don't come back into our county jail. Thank you.
The jail population is largely split into two segments in Monterey County. One segment are those involved in gang violence, and the other segment are largely those involved in alcohol and drug situations, where their offending crime has something to do with alcohol and drugs. We lack adequate resources for rehabilitation programs. The ones that are out in the public for people who aren't in jail are far too expensive for normal drug abusers and alcohol abusers to afford for very long. So we need to look at that. As sheriff, I've spoken with Supervisor Jane Parker and others in terms of perhaps being able to find a place where we could have a government-sponsored rehab program where we could divert people from the jail that are suffering from those types of issues and get them serious help outside of the incarceration world. We've looked at various places and we have some ideas on how that could work, and I believe we could use community corrections partnership funding to help fund those attempts.
This next question deals with ICE. For those of you who don't know, that's Immigration and Customs Enforcement. So the question is, and starting with Mr. Garcia, how would you cooperate with ICE on immigration?
Well, I think the big problem we have, obviously, when you look at the jail, you look how overcrowded it is. And you know the question we brought up in the last forum up, the Trust Act. As far as my concern, my position is that if someone's incarcerated for an offense where they can be released, we will hold them for that time where they will be released, and when that time is up, we will release them. We will not hold them beyond the time for ICE. It will be their responsibility to come and pick them up if that was what they choose to do within that time period. The problem I have with immigration problems and immigration holes is, it's like many things with immigration problems, is that the federal government has failed to follow up and do their job and take control of the immigration issue. It can't be thrown upon us, especially the Sheriff's Department of the County of Monterey. We are already beyond capacity at our jail. Look at the lawsuits. We cannot afford to continue to hold immigration holes, which further compounds the problem in our jail. Well, I've become intimately involved with all ICE issues, from the Trust Act to secure communities and everything in between. I've routinely met with coalitions of immigrants' rights people and discussed ICE holds. I modified our ICE hold policy prior to the Trust Act taking actual effect, and I continue to work with ICE and the immigrants' rights groups. We will hold people, we fully implemented the Trust Act in Monterey County. We're one of several counties that have fully implemented it. So we hold specific individuals for 48 hours, but those are the people that are designated in the law as authored by Tom Amiano and amended and passed. And it has relaxed. We have sent many fewer people with ICE. The statistics are in, and throughout the state of California, there's been a precipitous drop in the amount of people who have been delivered to ICE at the end of their stay in our various jails. So it does seem to be working. They are the lower level people and not particularly violent. Thanks.
As a commander with the Sheriff's Office, I was fortunate enough to work with ICE on the Secure Communities Project. Back in 2010, I could show you a video clip where I stood in front of the news and told the news and consequently the public that the Sheriff's Office does not want to get involved in ICE issues. That's their job. Back then, the reason I said that was because we don't want people in our in Monterey County's case, our Hispanic community who may not be here legally to be afraid to come to the Sheriff's Office as either a victim or a witness of a crime. We want them to understand that we're not going to go out and ask about their immigration status, and we're not going to enforce those laws. That's something we've done for a long time. In fact, in my almost 23 years with the Sheriff's Office, we've never pursued that. I think the thing is, we can allow ICE to come into our jail and examine our records to see who's here illegally, and they can take action as long as it does not impact our jail operation.
Mr. Miller, how does the Sheriff's Office partner with the community, or how do you plan to continue that?
An excellent question. We partner in so many different ways, and as sheriff, I'm all over the county. I'll be going to Lockwood for a town hall meeting in a couple of weeks. I was in Castroville at a peace march I had a neighborhood watch meeting one week, a couple of weeks ago. Every week is filled with community outreach, town hall meetings, neighborhood watch programs, school dedications. That's how we do that. We organize, we have community service officers who help us do this as well. And the best connections we have are through our great employees who work closely with the schools, the businesses, the residents in all of our varied communities. Monterey County is such a diverse community, and it's important that we work in every way we can with the community. I think it's also important that I speak Spanish, and I'm able to communicate with many of our Spanish-speaking communities directly at town meetings that are conducted entirely in Spanish. So those are some of the ways we do that.
The Sheriff's Office has had a long history of interacting with the community on things. Over the years as a deputy and as a sergeant, even as a commander, I've gone to numerous community meetings and helped set up numerous community watch programs. But we need to get the community's involvement in other things. And the thing I see strongest right now is the operation of the jail. As we mentioned earlier, the jail has been the subject of lawsuits from a couple of different groups. I would, in addition to looking at other resources on how to solve these issues, I would like to ask these community groups to come to the jail and tell us how they think we could do the job better, and include them as stakeholders in projects like that. I'd like to include them in outreach programs for inmates in the jail, faith-based organizations, other groups such as the Second Chance Youth Program I mentioned earlier, and the Community Alliance for Safety and Peace. All those groups can contribute a wealth of knowledge and a wealth of advice to helping us do our job better.
As a sheriff, you set the tone with how your department is going to work with your relationship with the community. And that is to say, basically, in my philosophy, my position as sheriff would be that we will always have a positive working relationship. When there's meetings to be held, the sheriff will be there, not my underlings, not my sergeants, not my deputies. I will be attending those meetings. When you have a meeting and you have concerns, you don't want to see my sergeants, you don't want to see my deputies, you want to see the sheriff. That's who you want to speak with. I had the fortune when I was a deputy sheriff, I was the community services officers for the town of Castroville, and I made it a point to go to the schools during recess and play with the kids and see the kids, and the parents saw me. And I was able to build up a relationship in that regard. Didn't need extra money, was part of my patrol procedures and my patrolling habits as a deputy. That's what we need to instill in our deputies. We need to build a relationship with the community. Without that, we cannot do it alone. We see severe staffings within the department. We only have a certain amount of eyes and ears, and we depend on the community. And with a positive working relationship with the community, I think we can address many concerns. Thank you.
Mr. Richards, what is the cost of keeping a prisoner, and are the courts sensitive to the costs?
Last time I checked, and of course it's been a little while, and I imagine it probably went up a little bit, it was about $72 a day. And I'm sure it's probably over 100 by now. No, I don't think the courts are sensitive to the cost, because we talked about ways to keep our jail population down with pre-trial inmates, and I agree with Fred about the setting the bail schedule and factoring in the whether or not the crime is violent to release some of these people a little bit easier than it has been in the past.
Well, I'm not exactly sure on the daily cost for deputies and for inmates in the jail, not deputies, inmates, but I think the amount that Mike has quoted is pretty accurate. As far as the courts are concerned, again, like I stated earlier, when you talk about high bails where people can't make bail, it just exacerbates the problem. And I don't think the courts, I hate to say that courts don't care, but I think there needs to be a change in mindset to where they have to understand that we have a problem in the jail. And the problem in the jail is that we need to provide security for those inmates that we're responsible for, but also for our deputies. And when you continually impose high bails that they can't make, it just makes the problem worse. We need to have a relationship, a sound, strong relationship with the judges, to show them what the problem is and to get them on board to work with us.
I have a very strong relationship with all the bench, including the presiding judge, and we've had discussions over these topics quite often. The actual average daily cost of housing an inmate is about $122 per day per inmate. And most of that is in personnel costs. So when I came up with the concept of 24 new custody and control civilian positions to replace deputy positions and allow the deputies to go out and restaff the jail, be freed up from the positions in the control positions, that saves significant money because civilians can be had at far less money for the same type of quality individuals because workers' comp and all pension and all associated costs are significantly less as is salary. So those are some of the things that can actually bring down the average cost of inmates within the facility. But I have specifically told the judges that they have to sentence people like they have to sentence people, and it's my job to house them humanely and properly, which is my role as sheriff, and that's what I'll do.
Mr. Garcia, should the sheriff's department have more fuel-efficient cars, and what can you do to save fuel and keep our air clean?
Should they have fuel-efficient cars? Absolutely. Gas is $40 a gallon. You bet. I think we need to look at every avenue of saving money as far as the use of our cars. Generally, when I was with the sheriff's department, we basically changed the cars over every 70 to 80,000 miles because the high use we use and the hard use we use, and let's face it, deputy gets in a car and puts his foot all the way down. If we can find fuel-efficient cars, that's fine. I know when I was with the sheriff's department, we tried all kinds of cars. We tried Volvos, we tried other types of cars. We tried to find anything that was able to work with us. So am I agreeable to that? Absolutely. I think anything we can do to find any kind of car that's actually efficient for us, it can be fuel efficient, but if it's not efficient for us as a patrol car, we can't use that. So if we can find fuel-efficient cars that meet the needs of what the deputies need on the streets, I'm all for it.
One way that we've actually improved the environment is through converting one old diesel gas belching bus that transports inmates down to the courthouse each day from the old diesel to a much more energy efficient model that will be in compliance with the law as it changes next year in terms of jail buses. We're also seeking funding for a second bus so that we can match that, double that. Another fairly innovative thing we're looking into doing is to carpooling our deputies who live and live in the Salinas area but work in the King City station area. It takes them about 45 minutes each way, and when you have 3 or 4 deputies all traveling from the Salinas area down to the King City area separately, then that certainly exacerbates the air quality issue. So we're looking into things like that, and we remain open to whatever type of measures will work to save the environment. It's important to all of us.
You know, a few years ago, we tried to compress natural gas in some of our patrol vehicles. That was a short-lived experiment. But fuel-efficient vehicles, I feel very strongly about. I bought one. I bought a Ford Fusion plug-in hybrid. I've got 14,000 miles on this car. 12,000 of those are all electric, and I've saved thousands and thousands of dollars. The car is big enough to where it could handle a deputy, because I'm a big guy, and even transport prisoners, and it runs well. You know, one of the arguments against going with an electric car is the fact that they don't perform like a gas car. That's not true anymore. These things, they're reasonably priced too. The other part of the answer to that question is, I hate to tell you this, but our deputies are already saving a lot of money on gas. We have fewer of them, so there's fewer cars on the street. So that's part of our staffing issue. The other part is the deputies we do have on the street, their morale is so bad that they're less proactive than they used to be. They usually just park and they go from call to call, and that's a shame.
Mr. Miller, you're first on this one. Do you have plans to deal with the homeless issues in Monterey County, especially homeless women? And if so, how?
Yes, I've actually, there was a homeless workshop in the city of that the city of Monterey, Councilmember Alan Hoffa sponsored some months ago, and I actually attended that meeting. I believe I was one of only 2 law enforcement executives that were there. It was well attended. There was probably 500 or 600 people, including 120 homeless folks, and we talked about all the issues related to homelessness and the difficulties, everything from could there be designated parking lots where the homeless who have vehicles could actually park in a safe environment at night, to what do we do with the homeless females and children who are left to their own devices. And it was a really interesting conversation, and hearing from those particular groups directly was important. And I actually will be participating in the homeless issues in terms of Monterey County going into the future, and it is an interest of mine.
Sheriff Miller mentioned the city of Monterey, and there was a recent city council meeting about 3 weeks ago in which the city of Monterey proposed a $1 per person or per house property tax increase to deal with the homeless issue. I don't know if that's an answer, but it might be a step in the right direction. And addressing the homeless issue on the from the law enforcement level is not something that we can do alone. We need to reach out to other community groups and other county services like social services to deal with this issue. I know that recently the sheriff's office was involved in a project to remove all the homeless people up along the Pajaro River levee because of a construction project going up there. But the problem is that the sheriff's office does not always have a place to put these people. And that's why we need to work with social services and maybe community activist groups to help resolve this problem. And as sheriff, I would do that. I would reach out to other stakeholders in this project and look for their assistance.
You have community social services within the county. You have social services compartments within the city. You also have faith-based organizations who are always willing to help. There's nothing worse than see a family with children living in a car being homeless. That's a terrible way to live a life. The sheriff talked about having a parking lot to house these people and let them stay in a safe environment. I think Santa Cruz is a great example where you've seen sweeps where they go in there and what do they find? You see a large amount of drug use. And that's what those things breed. They bring drug use. And not to say that all homeless people are going to be all drug use, but it does breed that. I think we need to get social services involved. We need to find places to house these people in a safe manner where they can't continue their drug use, if that's the case, or whatever their addiction may be, or if they're just down on luck, find a way to give them that helping hand. But I think with faith-based organizations, they're always willing to work. I've done that as a volunteer in Marina. We work the food banks, and we see these people come in, and they just need a helping hand. We're there to do that. And I think the sheriff's department can have a role, a very positive and successful role in dealing with the homeless.
As an elected official, how does the sheriff's role fit into the county's administration?
Well, there's a reason that the sheriff is an elected official as opposed to, for example, police chiefs. Under the Constitution of the state of California, the sheriff in each one of California's 58 counties is elected because they are the chief law enforcement officer of the county. In other words, the sheriff actually oversees law enforcement operations in all of Monterey County. The sheriff allows, I don't know if that's the right word, but they allow individual cities and municipalities within the county to practice law enforcement. As far as operating within the county government, the sheriff needs to work with the county administration. The classic example is with the Board of Supervisors on the budget. It's important that the sheriff have a good working relationship with the Board of Supervisors. Every sheriff I've worked with over the past 5 sheriffs have all had good working relationships with the Board of Supervisors, and they've ultimately worked together to resolve budget issues.
I think Mike has outlined many of the responsibilities and all the entitlements that go along with the office of the sheriff. He is right in the fact that the sheriff has a great deal of power, and he is the chief law enforcement officer of Monterey County. The sheriff, because of his position, has to deal with the Board of Supervisors, but he also has to deal with many other organizations in the county. There are many county agencies that he has to have a very solid and positive working relationship. I think when you have a solid relationship with those county entities, as well as the Board of Supervisors, because they have your purse strings, I think you can create a great relationship and you can solve many issues. We just spoke of the homeless. I think when you work with social services and have that positive working relationship with the Department of Social Services, you can solve those issues. But the sheriff has a great deal of power, and when you talk about dealing with other cities, Mike said that he allows them to work. I think as sheriff, I respect jurisdictional boundaries of any city and their law enforcement agency. Thank you.
Yeah, as sheriff, I don't exactly allow police departments to work. They do work on their own in incorporated cities. The relationship with county government is that I am the sheriff and I'm independent and I do not report to the Board of Supervisors, but in their power what they have is that they give me money. And if the Board of Supervisors decides they don't want to give me any money, I'm a captain without a ship, because there's nothing you can do to make them give you money. So the collegial relationship, which I would say is better than it's ever been in the history of Monterey County between the Sheriff's Office and Monterey County government, is exceptional. An example of that was the fact that we were asked to reduce $4 million from our upcoming budget, and I think we've got that whittled down to pretty close to nothing. So I think that's based largely on our relationship, and much of that is because I have working with me the former deputy CAO of Monterey County, Jim Colangelo, and John Gerton, who came out of the CAO's financial office. They know where all the money's buried. They know where to get the money for the eco-friendly bus and all the rest of the different projects we've been privileged to accomplish.
Mr. Garcia, how do you plan to improve morale when sheriff?
Well, for me, that's a very easy answer to do. You go out there, you look at your deputies in the face, and you tell them the truth. You don't skirt around issues, you tell them the truth. Once you tell them a lie, your relationship and your bond with them is over. The sheriff has talked about a great working relationship within the sheriff's department, how 36% of the deputies don't support him, but he doesn't say about the 64 who don't. I find it amazing that he says the deputies at the sheriff's department have never been happier. That's a joke. That is an absolute joke. If they were happier than ever, I think 100% of the deputies would have supported him. The interesting thing is the last election in 2010, he made an issue that the former sheriff didn't get the endorsement of the Deputy Sheriff's Association. He didn't either, and as a matter of fact, this election, he received less votes in this election in getting their endorsement than the last sheriff, yet he made it an issue. Morale is everything in the sheriff's department. You're going to have someone, the deputies have to know that as sheriff, that you respect them, you respect their work, and you always have to treat them with respect, because once you don't, it's over, and that's the situation today at the sheriff's office.
With all due respect, Fred couldn't be farther from the truth. And one thing Fred doesn't mention is last time, 4 years ago, Fred got the endorsement of the DSA with almost 60% of the vote, and a lot of people didn't vote then either. But this year he got 20%. So while over 60% didn't vote for me, 80% didn't vote for him. I've been there a little over 3 years. Fred's been there almost 30, although he hasn't been there the last 4.5 years. So I think he's kind of lost touch with what's going on in the sheriff's office right now. That was a meaningful vote. And the people who didn't vote, you could take a couple ways, but I take it as the people who didn't vote, and it was a computer vote, so you didn't have to leave your home. If they wanted to vote for one of my 3 opponents, I'd like to think that they would have voted for one of my 3 opponents. I had a 16% margin of comfort between myself and Fred, who was second, and I take that very seriously. And morale is on the upswing because I do what I say, and I keep my promises, and we improve it in every way we can so the deputies are happy as they can be.
Well, let me start by saying I agree with Fred and I disagree with Scott. The electronic vote that the deputies had they did not vote because of apathy. For everything I'm hearing, they not voted because of fear. But to answer the question about morale, what it boils down to is respect for the people you have in your office. Sheriff Mueller's administration has brought in a number of people from the outside with a better plan to operate the sheriff's office. I would look towards the very fine staff we have existing at the sheriff's office right now. There's a lot of very skilled, talented, and qualified people who we can look for on how to improve things and how to improve the operation of the sheriff's office. That alone will build morale when they're part of a better plan to make the operation smoother and more efficient. The bringing in people from the outside has also impacted morale because it's reduced the number of promotional opportunities for the deputies. Thank you.
Mr. Miller, you start this one. So many deputies seem to be overweight and not fit. What are your thoughts about physical fitness for deputies? I didn't write it.
Don't spend my time until people quit laughing, okay? I would just add on that last question, we have 420 plus employees. I brought in 4. So, in terms of fitness, last Sunday I ran and completed the Big Sur Marathon. The Monday before that I ran and completed the Boston Marathon. So I'm kind of into fitness in kind of a semi-big way anyway. And one of the reasons is I am trying to set an example of fitness, and for the general membership. I do run with the general membership on torch runs. I've done the Baker to Vegas law enforcement relay with members of the sheriff's office, deputies. And also we've altered the entry physical agility test into the sheriff's office. We've added an aerobic component of running 1.5 miles with a time limit coming in the door. It used to be the only physical agility testing was a 1 and 10-second physical agility obstacle course that most anybody could suck it up and run for 1 and 10 seconds. But I tell you, you can't really fake running 1.5 miles.
Not everybody in the sheriff's office is overweight, but I believe in the physical agility program that we have to get hired, and I believe that we should have that test on an annual basis. But I'd also like to factor in a component that takes into consideration someone's age. But that being said, we had a program a few years ago. In fact, I don't know if it's still in place or not, but you can voluntarily participate in the physical agility test, in which, depending on the level of your completion, adds a stipend to your salary, or not necessarily a stipend, but a bonus. And that was very successful. We saw a lot of people get into shape, and I would like to implement something like that again.
When I was a much younger man, I was into weightlifting and exercising, and I was all supportive of working out. I can't run a marathon, but I'm happy to say that my wife has run 8 marathons, so she laughs at me all the time. I think personally, for me personally, I think we need to have a program where deputies can be in shape. But I will tell you, as a 20-year member of the SWAT team, I thought it was imperative all the members of the SWAT team had to be in shape, had to be in top shape. But the thing that always came into play was workman's comp. You work out, they can file workman's comp. They work out off duty, they can claim they have to stay in shape for the SWAT team. We've always had an issue with that. I think that's one of the biggest obstacles when telling deputies they need to stay in shape. Because you're always dealing with court-related issues, whether they're lawsuits, workman comp, that they always are able to find a way to get claims. And that was a big problem that I had as a member of the SWAT team. I was fortunate enough as the sergeant of the SWAT team, I was able to kind of sort of skirt that issue, but we made sure that they were in shape.
Mr. Richards, should the sheriff be appointed? In the present situation, people are running against each other that will have to work together after the election.
No. The Constitution of the state of California is very clear about the sheriff being an elected official, and I think it's a good plan. But even appointed police chiefs have political issues as well. And I don't think the political issues that come with a sheriff's race for an election are sufficient enough to do away with the law that requires that position to be elected. I think it's important because it gives the citizens of the county the opportunity to select their own sheriff. And I disagree with it being an appointed position.
I too agree that it should not be appointed. I think it should be elected. Monterey County is extremely diverse. You're talking about the peninsula, South County, North County. All of them have their own needs. All of them have their own concerns. When you have 5 supervisors with constituents all over the place, if you're appointed, who do you answer to? You can only go so many directions with so many personnel. I do not believe that they should be appointed. I believe that the sheriff should be elected. And with any election, I'll be very candid, this is my second election as sheriff. There is turmoil. There's concerns with people in the department, who they should support, who they shouldn't support. They're afraid to come to events, not come to events. It makes it a very tenuous situation. It was in 2010, it's even more so today. I think the best thing you can do as sheriff is to reassure people that you set the tone, that when you're elected, and those who didn't support you, that's life. I tell you as a candidate for sheriff, not everyone at the sheriff's department supports me, and I understand that, and I don't hold a grudge against them. They have their personal beliefs and choices. And as sheriff, you have to relay that reassurance to them that you're not going to be a target, they're not going to be a target of any type of retaliation.
I have a fairly unique perspective on this in that I spent 6 years as a police chief who was appointed by a city manager who is appointed by a body, in that case of 7 city council members who are elected. So you're one spot removed from the electeds. So this direct election it's going to be this way. It's going to stay this way. There's no big movement to change it. Would I change it if I had the power? I'm not sure. It has its advantages and disadvantages. Mostly trying to raise money and having a level playing field like any election, not just sheriff, but any election. The people with the money, they have a lot more options in what they can do to get their message out, whatever that message may be. An appointed official who's chosen by a body of elected officials, in this case the board picking a sheriff, makes a lot of sense. But both ways have their pros and cons. I think we'll live with this one. I don't think we have much choice.
All right, Mr. Garcia, how do you feel about getting a pension from one job while holding another?
The loophole. I do not support that. I think it's pretty insulting to do that when you're given a salary and obtain a pension as well. I think that's something that they're trying to eliminate right now. I had an ingenious plan of my own to utilize that loophole for the benefit of the county, but it'll take too long to do that since I'll have a minute. But I will tell you this, when elected sheriff, I will not double dip as the term. I will take one salary only. My pension will be put on hold. I'll suspend it. I'll just take the salary of what the sheriff makes, and then at that I will then go into my retirement and take my pension then. But I would not double dip.
I'm in the unique perspective of someone who had the ability to double dip, and I didn't double dip. And I made that pledge in 2010, and I would say that Fred also made that pledge publicly in 2010 when that question was posed to us by the incumbent sheriff at the time. I believe that they're in the process or have recently changed that where it might not be an option going forward. I know part of Governor Brown's pension Reform Act is to try and do away with double and triple dipping. There are some sheriffs I know that have made over $500,000 as sheriffs collecting all their different pensions. And I don't believe in double dipping whatsoever, and I think that that's inappropriate. They do pay me a good wage as sheriff, and I'm happy to live off of that. I will collect my pension with all due respect, once I'm retired, and be happy to do so, and I think I've earned it over my career. Thanks.
Well, this is one question I think we're all in agreement on. None of us wants to double dip. I will not double dip if I'm elected sheriff. And like they said, there might not even be an option anymore, but something you need to be aware of, double dipping wouldn't even be that beneficial to any of us here. So there's not a real altruistic goal by telling you that I will not double dip. The reality of it is by not double dipping, you freeze your salary and you can recalculate the basis of your retirement based on your new salary. And in the long run, it pays you better. But no one here would double dip, and I commend both my opponents for saying that.
You might as well keep the microphone, because it's now time for each of the candidates to give their closing statements, which will be 1.5 minutes. And because Mr. Garcia was first to open and Mr. Richards was last, Mr. Richards will be first to open and Mr. Garcia will be last, and Mr. Miller gets to be in the middle both times.
Well, thank you again for having us here tonight so we could talk to you and tell you about what we believe in and how we would do things better if we were elected sheriff. Part of my platform deals with the fiscal management of the sheriff's office. And one of the reasons I'm running is I don't think the current administration has done well in this regard. I would do better at prioritizing the budget more for public safety issues than other agendas that are not directly related to public safety. We've heard a lot about the budget. There are other ways to address the budget besides just the basic budget. We look at things like there's asset forfeiture money that we get from the proceeds from drug sales that we can confiscate and use for public safety issues. In that regard, I would want to implement a more aggressive approach to our narcotics crimes in Monterey County. We don't see a whole lot in the news lately the past few years about a major drug bust. Does that mean that there's not a lot of drug use or sales going on in Monterey County? No, there are. We need to aggressively address that and use some of that asset forfeiture money for a good use. Other things with dealing with crimes such as ag crimes, we could look to insurance companies, and this is true with stolen car crimes too. There are insurance companies that insure ag entities as well as vehicles that would donate equipment and money towards addressing these crimes, and I have a whole lot more if you'd like to talk to me afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you for being here this evening. It is a privilege to be sheriff of Monterey County. You know, I do bring so many years of experience in various things between education, training, and experience. And I've lived a life where I was preparing myself for this post, and it's challenging and rewarding and something I love doing. And I think when you look at an incumbent and their track record as sheriff, you know, look beyond the rhetoric and the things that come up during a campaign. I mean, my three opponents need to unseat me. They need to give you reasons why they would be a better sheriff than me and why you ought to change horses in midstream. For lack of a better term. We have many ongoing projects, from the jail expansion project to dealing with the jail lawsuit. We're dealing in a very positive way and making a lot of progress in the things we're doing. We're rehiring staff we couldn't hire when we hit the down years in the budget. We're bringing them back. We're hiring excellent people. We've improved training, we've done a lot of things, and I'd like to keep that going. The danger is if we change again, change administrations, you don't want to really go through that every 4 years in a large law enforcement agency. You want to maintain that stability, and you want to maintain the continuity of the programs that have been started, and I tell you, we're changing just about everything that was there when I got there. I'd say our fiscal management is the best it's ever been in the history of the sheriff's office. We need to keep that going, give the deputies and the employees, our professional staff, the continuity, the stability, and the leadership to move forward for the next 4 years. Thank you very much.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming tonight, and thank you to the League of Women Voters. I appreciate the time to be here. You heard the word spin tonight. You heard Scott Miller talk about how happy the deputies are and how everything is going on. When you look at the Sheriff's Department, what do you see? You look at the paper, you see lawsuits, you see morale down in the toilets, you see severe understaffing in the jail, patrol, investigations, and the big topic in 2010 was the crime lab. He talks about creating all these positions, but I'm talking about jobs that affect you. Jobs that affect you. We have a crime lab. He's cut that 66%. We have one crime lab technician serving you, one. And his solution was, let's have the deputies do it, and then we're going to have them come over on overtime to work in the lab. I've got a plan when it comes to to community projects. That's why I've been endorsed by numerous educators. I've got the plan that works with collaboration and dealing with cities. That's why I've been endorsed by Mayor Soledad, former Mayor Gonzalez, former Mayor of Salinas. And when I talk about an approach and how we're going to deal with issues in the community to serve you and provide sufficient law enforcement protection, that's why I've been endorsed by a former undersheriff, the former chief of police of Marina, and former Sheriff Bud Cook. When I share my views and my thoughts on how I want to run the sheriff's department, they listen to what I have to say. And I will tell you, you're not going to tell a chief or a sheriff and go pull the wool over their eyes and give them some make-believe plan. My plan is sound, and that's why I'm running for sheriff, and that's to restore integrity back to the sheriff's department. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody, for coming. I want to thank the Carmel Valley Association for co-sponsoring this with the League, and let's give the three candidates a hand.